You're listening to Becoming CEO, where we share our journeys as solo founders to becoming the CEO of seven-figure businesses.
And these are our behind-the-scenes conversations as we figure it out, and these are things that most people just aren't sharing.
Is pressure good or bad?
I think it depends. What's the context of pressure?
So I had a client ask a question today. He had hired his first employee. It's an appointment setter role. And it's a largely commission-based role. And he's feeling the additional pressure of having to close more sales, not only to hit his business goals, but to pay this appointment setter. And so the question was, how do you manage or deal with that pressure? And it was almost asked I think the implicit message was this pressure is bad. How do I deal with this bad thing called pressure? Is it bad? Is it good? How do you know?
Fundamentally, I don't think it's either. I think it's what you make of it, which is, I think, the power in it, right? Like if, kind of you said, like, is that a negative thing? Like you're saying that as if it's negative, AKA a bad thing, but we could obviously reframe that as a good thing also. So I think the reality is it's neither. It's what's the story that we've created for ourselves around the pressure. And then, what does that really expose? Like, I mean, when I heard you say, okay, he is an appointment setter that he's hiring, that's commission only. Well, one, like in my mind as an owner, like that is a little bit of pressure for me in that, like, I think it's more pressure for that person that they have to kind of produce in order to, get paid. So like as an owner, like there's an advantage in that for me, as is all of the pay is tied to performance, but his pay is also then tied to how well I can close. And so if it's really just the pressure is coming from, am I going to be exposed that I suck at sales? Are we still really talking about pressure, or is it just you're concerned with what someone else might think of you or what you might think of you? Because if you're not able to pay him, it probably is an indicator of your performance before it's an indicator of his performance or her performance if it's a female setter.
That's a really interesting point. I feel like when you start hiring people, the first and the second and the third, but very early on, there's this sense of like, oh, this is real now. It's not just me dealing with my own insecurities and my own self-doubt, the consequences of which only I experience. It's not just me,
right, yeah.
Like writing myself a paycheck. All of a sudden, it's like, if I don't fundamentally believe in what we're doing, which I could kind of mask when I'm a solo, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I don't fundamentally believe in what we're building, in the organization, in our success, in our offer, in our product, in my ability as a founder, as a seller, as a yada, 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 these other people are now affected. And there's almost a sense of like, I don't know if you went through this, but there's almost a sense of guilt. Like when you have a moment of self-doubt, I started to feel like, in those moments, like, what am I doing stringing these people along? This thing's a house of cards. They weren't serious doubts, right? But like,
Yeah.
like in your darkest moments, like in those lulls, right? When revenue is down and you're not quite sure why. And then it's like, well, why did I bring these people along for the ride if we can't even make this work? And so it's really interesting. I think ultimately it comes down to that question of confidence, right? The onus is on you as a founder. This is true if you're a solo or not, right? But I think it becomes more of an imperative when you start building a team. The onus is on you as a founder, as a CEO, to have bulletproof confidence in what you're doing and what you're building. And that's your number one job. Because if you don't have that, that pressure will get to you. And the kinks in your armor will show. Everybody will see the self-doubt. Your team will be able to see it. It'll be self-evident. But maybe that's me. Did you go through anything like that?
Yeah, I think what I was thinking as you were saying that is like, um, I think I was more fearless slash confident when I knew less. So like those early hires, I don't think I recognized some of the quote unquote pressure um, that maybe I should have. I think just out of ignorance. um, and it being my first time, like going through some of these things. Like, whereas, some of what you just said kind of hits me in the gut, even in this moment, because, like, as I've shared on previous episodes, like, we kind of have been in like a similar spot in the last, couple of years. And so, like, something's off. And I know a piece of it, which was probably a larger piece of it, is like my own vision and certainty of where I even want to go. And so, how that plays out for me in the day to day, I mean, the probably creates some sort of lack of confidence in myself, but that trickles down to other people now, which, like, now it's like I actually feel more pressure now because it's like I need to get my, stuff together um in order to get everybody kind of moving forward and hitting the goals that they have for themselves. Whereas, like, I guess I just didn't think about it that early because back to one of our previous conversations, I think the last episode, um, I think the earlier days, the playbook and the activities and the actions that you need to take in our business model were way clearer than where what they are at the stage that I'm at now. Like, it's not like, yes, more calls. If you have more calls and your calendar is full, that's when you hire sales help. Do you go setter? Do you go closer? Here's how you think that through. Here's how you make that decision. Here's when this breaks and you probably need help in fulfillment. Like, there were so many clear examples from being in the right environment, like your client is in with you, like that. It was just, oh, this is what I do, that I didn't think about the pressure. Whereas, because it was, again, laid out. Whereas, like, now it's like, well, what do you want to do? Which then is like, oh, I have to decide. I don't know how to make that decision or what I want yet. And so that's actually where the pressure gets created. So, yeah, I think shockingly, I didn't think about it as early as maybe this person is thinking about it, because I was around people like you who and above us that were like kind of just, oh, this is what you do. Like, that's just how it works. And so I'm like, oh, okay. Like, I didn't worry as much. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it adds to the pressure, right? So you're not wrong. It's like, when you're trying to go from, I don't know, 30% body fat down to 20% body fat, it's not complicated, right?
Right.
Just reasonable caloric deficit, get into the gym, burn some extra calories, cut out sugary drinks, and you'll start dropping fat. But when you start to get to like, 15%, so I hear. I don't I don't really know, right? Not quite there yet, right? When you start to get to 15% and you want to cut that extra fat or start building extra muscle and your workouts are plateauing, it's not that simple. Like, the playbooks are not clear because very few people get to that stage of, being shredded or whatever, right?
Right.
So, and then your body adjusts and you plateau and you've got to do different things to be able to get those incremental gains. I think business is the same way. Very few people get to that seven-figure mark. What are the stats? You know them. They're like ridiculous,
Yeah.
right? And so getting to that stage within any industry or business model, there's always playbooks and people are profiting off selling you those playbooks, obviously, right?
Hmm.
And they, to a certain extent, they work. And
Yeah.
then the playbooks no longer work at a certain stage. And that creates more pressure because you got to the stage that you're at by following a playbook. And I don't want to minimize the accomplishment of building a business. But if we're being honest, then I'll minimize myself first and foremost. I followed a recipe. I didn't innovate. I didn't think
Yeah.
creatively. I followed instructions. I was pretty good at following those. I executed well, but I followed instructions to a
Yeah.
certain point until the instruction manual didn't work anymore to get me to the next level. And that creates more pressure. And by then, you have more people on the bus that you're driving that are expecting you to take it somewhere. and then it compounds.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all that. I think the how do you also then reframe this and think about it from a way in which that will drive you? Because like I remember when I first hired Lisa, who's now my number two, who's been with me since the beginning. Um, I and she was not a performance based role; she was like on the delivery side, um, and I couldn't afford her rates, and or bring her on. Like she was in a job she didn't like, had flexibility to work with me in the beginning, but she wanted out. And I had to like give her a plan to show her like, hey, if you come on board with me at just 10 hours a week to start, here are key milestones as to when by X date you should be full time with me and you'll be able to leave this job you don't like. And I had to like lay that out for her, which in the beginning was the easy part, like laying out the plan. Hey, at this number of clients, I'm going to need you to go from 10 hours to 15 and then 15 hours to 20. And then when we hit this, I'll raise your rate. And then, from this to that. And it's like, then I had to execute on it. Right. Um, and I like, thankfully was able to execute on that plan and was able to, reach that goal. But that plan motivated me. It also motivated uh, her to stick with me through kind of the challenges. Like she knew, like she had a lot on the line in that, like she believed in what we were doing and wanted to be a part of it, and saw what these milestones were. And so she was cool with waiting a certain window of time for those milestones to be achieved because again she believed in that outcome, but like her believing in that and me having it in front of me, knowing that that's what needed to happen or I have to start this process again, was very motivating. So like that sort of pressure I think was good. uh, I could totally see how in hindsight I could have looked at that from a negative light, and it could have ruined the entire thing before it even started. uh
Well, I think the
so
line
I guess
might
how do
be
you reframe it?
yeah, and I think the line might be I'll attempt to characterize what makes the difference. Is the pressure pushing you and motivating you to do what you already know you wanna do? Or does the pressure feel unnecessary? Does it feel like it's taking you in a different direction? Does it feel like it's distracting you? So in your example,
Hmm.
you wanted to grow.
Yeah.
You wanted to hire her. You wanted her full
Yeah.
time. And the pressure of the plan just pushed you in that direction, making that commitment, laying out the plan. It pushed you in the direction that you wanted to go. It was not a
Mm.
distraction.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I would call that, I would say, versus I mean, just to make a difference, like if it were going to where I want to go, I feel like that would be more of a pull. If it was to where I didn't want to go, that would probably feel like pushing.
Yeah.
And so for this person then is some of this pressure, and I think we've talked about this on another episode also, is like, is this person realizing the playbook to utilize is taking them down a path that they don't actually want to go down. They just are realizing that now. Like, yeah, it's a good playbook. The playbook works if you execute it and if you want the end result of this play. But if you don't want that, then this is probably not the right play for you.
Yeah.
Um, and this is goes back to like you modeled someone else's playbook. I've modeled someone else's playbook. I bought in on that's the playbook that I wanted, and I've so the plays worked, right? It and that because it's what I wanted was pulling me to, oh yeah, this is my next move. I can see how this move positions me for the next move and the next move, and it all made sense. Um, so yeah, maybe if it's feels exciting, it's like it's the pull. And if you're like, like why do I not feel good about this? Maybe it is that you're being pushed into something that is misaligned with what you actually want, and maybe you're just saying you want it.
It's a good litmus test.
Yeah,
So
one of the things that I say to clients in that I've said to people in sales, um, I draw, and maybe we've talked about it. I draw two concentric circles, Venn diagram with a little overlap. And, on one side, it's, hell yeah. And um, I usually say F yeah and OF, like on either side. And it's like, look, if this opportunity of joining our program or this opportunity of bringing on this appointment setter, and you're like only thinking, oh crap, right? I'd probably say you're not ready. Conversely, if you're so amped and excited, like, yes, like I'm building my team, da da da, and there's zero fear, you might not be taking it seriously enough. And so it's like, I think you kind of need a little bit of that, like, I know this is who I need to become. I know this is what I need to do, but it's a little bit scary. I gotta perform. Like there needs to be the mix of that pull push for our previous example. I think is where I'm like, oh, okay, this is actually the right move because I'm feeling a little bit on both sides. Whereas if it's only that one side, I'm like, oh, maybe I'm not ready because it's not what I want, or I'm not taking it seriously enough. So that if that's the case, then maybe this person is screwed to begin with because I'm not taking this seriously enough, you know. And so I don't know. How does that land for you?
yeah, no, I think it makes sense. The thing I worry about for people is, there's all this. It's misreading stress and pressure and labeling it as all bad.
Mm,
You know, um, especially with like all the awareness around mental health right now, which is a net positive thing, absolutely. But one of the
mhm.
challenges with like all the mental health gurus in your feed on Instagram,
Yeah.
most of them aren't shouldn't be entitled to an opinion, is that you have a lot of just broad stroke statements being made. All stress is bad for you. All pressure is
Right.
bad for you, right? Anything that increases cortisol is bad for you, right? Cortisol goes up and down naturally throughout the day. It's not necessarily good or bad.
Right.
There's context to everything, right? And so I think a lot of entrepreneurs that I see kind of struggle with that. There's this desire to almost avoid all elements of stress or pressure. And if anything feels stressful or they feel pressure, then it's automatically a sign they're going in the wrong direction. And I think that's problematic. I'll give you an example from my business.
Mm,
So, last year we've talked about it in the podcast, we downsized by about 30%. That involved, there's reasons for that I think we discussed in the past. It
mm,
involved cutting some expenses. We had to entertain the question, and I think this is why we downsized. This was the lesson that we were meant to learn. We had to entertain the question of how far down do we go? How much do we downsize? How much do we cut expenses? That's an interesting question.
mm,
And there was a line that we drew. And we said, well, we're not willing to cut below this. There are these people, these functions that are going to have to remain because if we cut them, it's too much of a disruption to the business's operations, and we're not willing to be that disruptive. And what that meant was, okay, in that case, we have to make this much money every month to make this work. And that was pressure. Now we could have made more cuts and alleviated the pressure, but that would not have been the right decision
mm,
because the long-term consequences of that would have been unfavorable. There were consequences that we didn't necessarily want to engage with, right? So we accepted some short-term pressure. All right, we're going to cut down to here, therefore we need to make this much money. There's some pressure to sell now, which had consequences, but we accepted that short-term pressure in the interest of, the long-term viability and sustainability of the business. I'm happy we made that decision, and it created pressure, and it was stressful, and it
yeah.
was the right decision in retrospect.
Yeah. I think, one thing as you say that, and then even if you zoom out on this question in general, uh, I think Layla Hormozy said it, or maybe it was in Dan Martell or someone. It's like,
One of the
hey,
two people that you
Earth,
quote.
what?
I said one of the two people that you quote.
One of the two people that I quote often. Um, it might not even be them, honestly, but it's like, Earth to person that we're speaking to. You signed up to be an entrepreneur. Like, literally the rest of your life and existence is going to have infinitely more of this. And if you don't like it, well, maybe you shouldn't be an entrepreneur because that's actually what you signed up for. And it's like, I mean, I was just even having a conversation with a buddy of mine who was like, I was just talking about some of the challenges we're going through. And he's like, yeah, but like, think about where you were 10 years ago. And I like literally wrote it down. And I was like, crap, like I've come so far. Like I've achieved a lot of the things that I was like desperately trying to get to. Um, and like back then I said I was in this for the long game. And he's like, what if this next goal that you have actually took the exact same amount of time to get to where you're at now, yet you're expecting it to be done in like 10% of the time? Like, you told me you were in this for the long game. Are you? Because this is what is going it's going to feel like. And so if you're in it for the long game, just take the pressure off yourself because you already know you're in this for the long game. Like you're going to do whatever it's going to take to get there. I'm like, yeah, that's true. And like that actually helped eliminate, the time, moving the time horizon and just thinking about how far I've come and the fact that I signed up for this. I very knowingly chose this path and re-choose it every single day.
Yeah.
Um, Thus you have to accept that there's going to be these things that come along with it. And then I think maybe for this person, like this is that first wake up call of like, hey, like building a business is going to create more moments like this, and this is just the first one for you. And if you're uncomfortable with this, then like this is the first test, right? Like cuz if you can't handle having this responsibility with one other person, like, and the type of business and goals you crave is going to require a team of 10 plus, like we need, how else are you going to build the capacity to handle this? It's actually just doing it. It's like, so yeah, whether you think it's good or bad is actually irrelevant. It's going to exist. Can you withstand it and tolerate it and make it work for you versus against you?
I think it's a brilliant point. What I see a lot of newbie novice entrepreneurs do is they try to set their business up to avoid pressure and stress.
Yeah.
And they make all kinds of silly decisions in that interest just to spare themselves the pressure. I remember talking to somebody, this is early on in my journey in a mastermind, and I was talking about just, the amount of, front end sales I need to hit in that month. And the response I got from this person was, "Man, that's crazy. Why would you want the pressure of having to make that many sales every month?" And I was so like, in my mind, I was so committed to my business model at that time. I just didn't even understand what he meant. Like, what's the problem? Yeah, it's pressure, but so what, right? And this person had a different business model in mind, right? That would have less pressure, right? And that wouldn't be as stressful. And that person's not in business anymore. And I got to tell you, I got many stories like that.
Oh
New
yeah.
entrepreneurs trying to avoid pressure, trying to avoid putting themselves in situations where they have to just get it done and perform, trying to build a bulletproof business model that can't fail. No such thing exists. And the evasion of pressure, I think, ultimately evades them out of business. Ultimately,
Yeah,
well,
and I would even add to that that I don't think that you tied that to early entrepreneurs. I think that happens again at different levels. Like I could easily say that I'm experiencing that right now, and like as you said, some of that, and it was actually a thought I was having last night into this morning. Like I've gotten, and you actually, I think you said this in an early episode. Uh, I think I've gotten pretty comfortable. Um, and like my schedule is really nice. Yeah, we're dealing with problems, but like I've dealt with a lot of problems way worse. So like my skin is way thicker. Like they don't like impact my mood, day to day. What do I want them to be better? Yeah, but like, have I taken on the next level of discomfort to actually move that through to the next phase? I I don't think I have. I think I've been probably playing it a little bit safe again. Like safe, like just comfortable. Like, oh, well, if I got to do this to achieve that result, like that means more for me, or that means having to hire another person, which then I got to spend my time on blah, blah, blah. It's like, I've definitely ran through those scripts as recent as the last month and just started thinking about the yesterday. So just to anyone who's above that level of the first hire, I think this may be actually something you got to be aware of at a level and where you feel like you stall. Like that could be another reason. It's like you don't want to go back into um, the fire. Have you ever read the book, The Millionaire Master Plan?
I don't think so.
Uh, Something Hamilton his last name, and he talks about this concept of the lighthouse. And on one side of the lighthouse is freedom, and on the other side of the lighthouse is responsibility. And if you've ever been up a lighthouse, the stairs either zigzag or they kind of spiral, and you end up on each side at one point. And like, okay, cool. You're going to get your business to a certain point where you have a lot of freedom, a lot of leverage, the schedule you want. And in order to get to the next level, you're going to have to walk back to the other side and take on more responsibility, AKA pressure, AKA stress, AKA probably working more, all that stuff, to then again position yourself to move back to the other side of the lighthouse where you're back to feeling freedom and leverage just at a higher level of that. It's like you have to go back. And that's like probably where I'm at right now. It's like I've been on the one side of the freedom staircase and I got to go, take on a little bit more responsibility to get us to my next version of freedom, which is going to be again more pressure, more a little bit more complexity, stress, hours, maybe not as cush of a schedule as I've had the last 2.5 years, you know, and that's do I want that? I don't know. Like, you got to think about it. Just like this person's like, okay, do you want this added responsibility to position yourself for the next? You got to be able to see that next, be able to look up the staircase, to know that it's going to come again. The the byproduct and the benefits of going through that will happen again. Just are you ready to get through it?
And sometimes you regress, to use your
Oh yeah,
staircase. Like sometimes you fall down a couple of stairs and you got to go back to doing things that you used to do that you don't want to do anymore. Yep. Okay.
cutting back 30%. Like, hey, I
I'm the
gotta.
classic example of that.
Yep,
Practically, this didn't mean that at the time, but months later, when we lost a salesperson, that meant I jumped back into sales and joined the sales
yeah,
team. And I've been a part-time salesperson for my company for the past 3 months, and I hadn't actively sold in a couple of years before this. I always had a
hmm,
team of at least 2 or 3 salespeople. That is closers, right? So, and again, there's a choice, right? I could begrudgingly accept the role and have a pity party on myself for it. Woe is me. How could this happen? I'm moving backwards. It shouldn't be this way. I could have spun that narrative, and guess what? I wouldn't close many deals because I'd be
yeah.
fundamentally dissatisfied with the position that I'm in. Or you can choose to embrace your circumstances wholeheartedly with open arms and know that it's all good for you, even if it means you regress outwardly a little bit. There's a wisdom in that, and you're going to learn something. And you'll be stronger as a result. And that's obviously, yeah, I had my moments, right? But that's the path that I ultimately chose.
Yeah, like it's the metaphor of like as you ascend up a mountain, new heights, like what happens? The oxygen gets thinner. Actually, it gets harder to breathe, and which obviously makes even just the same movement that you did at lower elevations a whole lot harder, right? Throw on some weight, team members, team goes like it, less oxygen, every normal move feels amplified and more difficult. Yet you come back down that mountain and you try to, perform, you're gonna be like, whoo, like this is amazing. I mean, like that's the analogy of the person who trains at altitude and then runs a marathon at sea level. Like their capacity to take in oxygen has increased, right? They've increased their capacity, to handle that. And so sometimes, like, yeah, people train at altitude, come back down, crush, go back higher to a new altitude that they've never been before because the next race actually isn't at sea level, it's at 1,000 feet, and then they go higher, train again, and then in their next race they're capable at 2 3,000 feet or a mile high if you live in Denver. Like, and so yeah, like I think like you said, there are points when, like, you hopping back into sales, yeah, you were a little out of it, but like you probably saw your entire sales team, sales process, sales function with a whole new set of eyes that allowed you to probably shore up certain things for when you added the next person back in, or made the tweak that maybe was the limiting factor before. Like, you just kind of see things differently, you experience it differently when you're not struggling to breathe. But
Well, I'll
that
tell you what
was
it did very
often just to
practically.
position you to go back up.
Here's what it did very practically that we didn't see coming is putting me in sales eliminated our desperation to hire somebody because I'm fulfilling
Mm,
the role. And so in the past, we would have been very quick to hire and we would churn and burn people like it's no one's
mm,
business. And it just wasn't working. So plugging me in meant, okay, well, we're solid. Like, no one's going to close like me. Right. And we're not in a rush anymore to hire. If somebody comes along who's really, really good and is like a home run, yeah, we'll bring them on. But I'm not going to bet on anybody at this stage. That's a risk because we don't need them to hit our numbers. We have me.
so if we were to kind of like encapsulate this into like, uh you know, the original kind of question was, how do you handle pressure?
So I've got 2
Um,
points that I'm dying to make before we wrap up.
okay, cool.
So
Go.
number one, I just want to be really clear. This is not meant to. I don't want you to rationalize retreating or regressing or shrinking the business or like going down. That's not the point of this conversation. I will say though, however, I was naive enough to believe while we were growing that we would always grow and we would never retreat or regress, and that was very naive. And I believe I
Yeah.
had to go through that experience last year in order to like defang the beast, right? And
Hmm.
acknowledge that, shrinking the business a little bit is not failure. It could be a good thing. It could lead to good things. It could be a net positive, and it has been. So if you're the kind of person that's like, we're gonna grow, we're gonna grow forever, and I'm not open to ever not growing, I would like to challenge that contention. I don't think
Yeah.
that's practical, and
Yeah.
I don't think that mindset's healthy. The second quick
Agreed.
point I wanna make is, to the point of avoiding pressure, we're in a position now in our business where I'm not, terribly satisfied with a number of things, and there's some pressure. But the pressure at this stage, and you made a reference to this earlier, is a lot easier for me to handle because I've just been through a lot.
Yeah.
Like, I've just had my back to the wall many times in a far more existential way than I do today. I'm feeling some pressure today, but it pales in comparison to some of the pressure I've faced before. And when you avoid putting yourself in high pressure situations, you don't build that muscle. The only reason I can sit here today and talk about this like very matter of fact without a lot of emotion or stress is because I've been here before.
Yep.
To use a
Yeah.
sports metaphor, like if you're the person that gets, let's say it's basketball, if you're the person that gets the ball in the final minute to take the shot, yeah, the first time that's nerve wracking. The 100th time, like Michael Jordan didn't think twice about it. Everyone knew
Yeah.
the ball was going to MJ and he was cool as a cucumber. But if you don't take those shots, you don't develop the muscle.
Yeah. What's that quote? He's like, I envision myself uh missing it or something like that. Like, I already know what it feels like to miss the shot. Like, because I've missed thousands of them. That's not going to prevent me from taking it again, you
So
know?
for my client, my message to him was, yeah, it's pressure. Good. Go close some deals. You need to show yourself that you can respond to the pressure and perform and get the results. Because if you do that at this level, you'll do it at a higher level. For me, when I jumped back into sales, it was like desperate times. Like Ahmed needed to close deals. And if he didn't
Yep.
close deals, we were in trouble. And I said, game on. Watch me. And I did, right? But I was only able to do that because I'd responded in previous situations to similar situations favorably. And I developed that self confidence, call it self efficacy, the belief that you can do what you set out to do. That's the real asset here that you're developing when you put yourself
Yeah.
in high pressure situations.
Yeah, it's like the be do have kind of mentality. So okay, I agree with both of those things, and I would just add to that, you know, remember you signed up for this. There's going to be all sorts of pressure coming your way, um, and it likely will feel like it's bigger than the thing that you are feeling right now, like hiring this setter. But you compound those sorts of moments over time, and despite the intensity of the pressure, your ability to handle it will have also increased, uh, which will make you be, have the capacity to deal with it. And that's just a part of the game. So, it's like you got to just keep going, like one step in front of the other, despite the uncertainty. Because again, if you had all the answers, you wouldn't be in the position that you're in right now. So, yeah, you signed up for it. Try to enjoy the ride. You're becoming a better version of yourself, whether you know it now or not. You'll look back and be like, "Damn, like I can handle these moments. Brush them off easy." All right, guys, let us know what you think. If you haven't left us a rating and review in all the places, we'd love and appreciate that. We're actually now active on the socials. If you're just listening, you haven't checked us out on, we got the video versions on YouTube. We're dropping some of these content on Instagram as well. So head on over there. It's early days for us there, but go ahead, check it out. We'd love to see you in all of the socials. Take it easy, guys.